If you haven't listened to episodes 52 and 53 yet, I encourage you to go ahead and pause, head on back and start there. It's not because you won't understand today's conversation, because you will, anyone can listen to it. Really, it is because these 3 episodes are building on each other and they belong together. In episode 52, I talked about why so many of us feel like our bodies never truly settle. And in episode 53, I shared some of the ways that my body was talking to me and the practices that actually helped me to feel like myself again. And today's episode is what naturally comes next. Because after recording those past 2 episodes, I couldn't stop carrying this one question with me. I thought about it on my morning walks. I thought about it as I was sitting underneath a tree in Mexico with my favorite cup of café de olla. I thought about it every time that my watch reminded me that my body was under high stress again. It actually said overload. It even followed me into bed on the nights that I got 8 hours of sleep, and I still woke up wondering, what's going on? Why am I not feeling like myself? And the question is simple. Why is it that we can rest and still not feel restored? Maybe you've wondered that too. You get home after a day of work, after school pickup, activities, and you sit down on your couch and you think, if I close my eyes for a minute, you know there's a very real chance that everyone is going to be eating cereal for dinner because you just may not make it back to the kitchen. I have had those days, more than I would like to admit. For a long time, I assumed that this was simply just being an adult, that this is what it meant to care deeply, to parent, to build meaningful work, to contribute to your community, because I love meaningful work. I love building things that matter. I love serving people. And so this episode, it's not about doing less. It's actually about doing something that is so much deeper. It's about learning how to recover well enough so that we can actually continue doing what matters for the long term. Because here's what I figured out. I wasn't actually lacking rest. I was lacking recovery. Those are not the same thing. And one evening, I looked down at my watch again after another long day, and again it said overload, which means recovery is needed. And I realized that my watch wasn't telling me anything that my body hadn't already been trying to tell me for months. It was simply paying attention before I actually was. And once I started listening to my body, to these signals, I actually realized the deeper point. You see, I had confused resting with recovery, and those are not the same experiences. I know that. I've known that. Sometimes it's hard to practice what you know, right? You see, every day, life is asking something of us, not just something, a lot of us. Our children are asking, our relationships are asking, our work is asking, our communities are asking. Even the dreams that we are pursuing are asking something from us. And there's nothing wrong with that. Giving is part of being human. Loving asks something of us. Building a meaningful life asks something of us. And the question isn't whether life is going to draw from us, because it will. The question is, what actually allows the water to flow back in? I love water. I have been thinking a lot about water and streams lately, especially as we're dealing with a drought here in our area. I even thought about it as we were down in Mexico and looking at the small river creek that dries up but flows great when it runs through there. You see, a healthy stream, it doesn't stay alive because it is desperately holding on to every single drop. It stays alive because it is continually being replenished. Fresh water is flowing in, and the fresh water is flowing out. It receives and it gives, and it receives again. And that's what keeps it clear, right? That's what keeps it alive. When the water stops moving, it becomes stagnant. And it is not because the water is bad, but it's because it was not meant to stop running. So I want to give you a very clear example of that. The creek in the small town that my husband's family is from, sometimes it flows and it is huge. It is, like class 4 rapids. It's crazy. However, most of the time it's dry and you can actually walk right across it with maybe one tiny little creek that runs through. But you don't have to jump on rocks. What I'm saying is it's barely running. But then when it rains, it runs and it fills up. However, there's puddles along the way that have been stagnant. And so you don't want to get into that water. You don't want to touch it. You don't want to use it until the rains have come and washed all of the stagnant water through again. I hope that visual helps you to understand what I'm saying. You see, I think we, as people, as a person, we're like that water, we're like that stream, we're like that creek. The goal is never to just disperse all of your water endlessly as a river, as a person. You can't just give. You actually need to have input. You need to be able to receive. And this is what I like to look at as recovery. Now, recovery, it is not the absence of work, okay? Work has always been a part of being human, of being alive, of being a creature on this world. You have to work, right? Caring for children is work. Building a business is work. Loving your community, it's work. Recovery, it's not asking us to stop working. It's asking us to remember that even streams, they have to receive water before they can give again. It's not just once a year. It's not after they burn out and dry up. It's not when they finally worked hard enough and they earned it, which just blows my mind. It's every day. In small little ways, in little tiny rains here and there, repeated over time. That actually took me back to something that took me a little bit to understand, and I'm still coming to realizations about it now. My feet. You probably weren't expecting me to go there. Again, it wasn't where I actually expected this story to go to. But when I look back at it, I really think that my feet were trying to get my attention long before I was actually paying attention and listening to what I needed. You see, my feet have hurt for months, probably for a long time. And it's not because of an injury. Nothing has happened. They're just tired. And looking back, it actually makes sense. My feet were carrying exactly what the rest of me was carrying. Too much. And when I responded the way I think many of us did, I kept on telling myself that I would slow down after this next project, after this meeting, after this season, after this month, after this year. You probably know how that story goes, right? There's always another season. There's always another responsibility or another opportunity and another person who is needing something from us. Life rarely stops actually asking us to do something. And that's okay. There is always something downstream that needs your water. But you also need to be filled. And they can happen at the same time. I still have some tightness in my feet and my calves, but I have actually learned how to recover. It didn't happen all at once. It actually started in small little things. I bought some compression socks. I paid attention to moving my legs when we were in long trips. I thought more intentionally about what I was eating and drinking beforehand and during and after. I became more intentional about actually noticing when my feet needed something instead of actually pushing through it and taking the time to literally lay on the floor and throw my feet up in the air. None of those things made my life easier. They simply helped my body to keep doing what I was asking it to do. One afternoon, I actually caught myself thinking, why am I willing to support my feet so much like this, but not the rest of my body? And it stayed with me. Because maybe my feet weren't the problem. Maybe they were just the first part of my body that was honest enough to tell me that something had to change. Right around the time that I was having all of this stress in my feet, I took this trip to Hawaii, and I've shared pieces of that story before. So I don't need to tell you the whole thing again. You can go back and you can listen to that. What matters, it wasn't the vacation. It was actually what happened after that. Because when we came home, I noticed something that I hadn't felt in a really long time. My body was available. My shoulders weren't that tight. My jaw wasn't clenched all day long. And my thoughts weren't constantly jolting off into 3 different conversations ahead of where I actually was, if you know what I mean. The strangest thing was that literally my mouth stopped moving. I wasn't talking as much. And I know that might sound funny, but I really mean it. I had found more space to listen, to notice. And that silence didn't feel like something that I had to fill. I was actually able to stay up long enough to tell everyone goodnight instead of crashing out before everybody else. I was excited to start cooking dinner again. Maybe not every night, but enough that I actually noticed that I was excited to cook. Nothing about cooking had changed. Our kitchen had not changed. I had changed. Or maybe I was actually just finding my way back to who I am. You see, I don't think when we have the opportunity to recover, it transforms us into someone new. I think that recovery, it removes this noise so that we can actually see who we are, who we have been this whole time when we're not just surviving. It also helped me realize something else. Recovery is not the absence of responsibility. My responsibilities did not disappear. My children still needed me, my work still mattered, dinner still needed to be made, and the dishes, they still found their way to the sink. Life never stopped asking things of me. I simply stopped believing that I could keep on pouring from a stream that wasn't being replenished. I began making room for the things that quietly actually filled me back up. Maybe you too have experienced something similar. Maybe it wasn't Hawaii. Maybe it was just a quiet morning. Maybe you had a long walk or a camping trip, an afternoon in your garden, a time to chat with someone who actually saw you. Whatever it was, I think your body was quietly whispering, there you are. It's not, now you've become someone better. No. It's just saying, there you are, the person that I've been waiting for. That realization right there, it sent me looking for answers. And I am so surprised by what I found. Not necessarily surprised, but it's just interesting. You see, researchers who study stress have discovered that stress itself, it's not what actually wears us down. Let me say that again. Stress isn't actually what's making us feel icky. Human beings were designed to move into periods of activation and then back into recovery. You see, the challenge comes when we are staying activated, stressed for so long that our bodies stop actually understanding that the emergency is over. I can remember reading that and realizing, oh, no wonder so many of us are exhausted. Remember, I've told you it's not because we're weak. It's because our bodies have become really, really good at protecting us. Our bodies are waiting for us to actually show them it's safe for you to recover again. What surprised me over the couple of months after Hawaii wasn't discovering the secret to recovery. It was actually realizing how often I already experienced it. I just hadn't recognized it for what it actually was. You see, recovery for me wasn't hiding in Hawaii. It wasn't having another morning routine that I needed to master. It was actually already scattered throughout my life, throughout my days, in these little invitations that I've been walking right past. But the more that I paid attention, the more I actually noticed a pattern. You see, the moments that actually restored me, that helped me feel like me, they weren't the loud ones. They were the quiet ones. Sitting outside before everyone else was awake and watching the sunrise. The sweet smell of my cinnamon coming up from my cafe de olla, and that cool morning air touching my skin. The birds slowly greeting the morning before anybody else is up. It was when I was walking slowly around our property, not trying to accomplish anything, just walking, watching the chickens scratch through the dirt as if they had nowhere important to be but to have some fun. It's when I go fishing with my family. And it's not because we always catch fish, because we are not catching, we are fishing. But it is because for a little while, none of us are caring if anything is actually getting done or accomplished or what's next. Sometimes the ways that heal me are actually taking my laptop outside instead of staying stuck inside at a table or a desk. The responsibility doesn't change, the work doesn't change, but I do. I've been thinking a lot about that, and none of those little moments have solved my problems. The emails are always there when I walk back inside, and the laundry still needs to be folded, and dinner still needs to be made. Life doesn't just become easier. I simply remember I was a part of it. Have you guys heard about awe? I don't think I've talked about it in a while. But that's what awe does. So researchers have really helped to define this. You can look into it, called moments of awe. This is actually something I learned a ton about in my forest school training. When you're standing underneath the sky, when you're listening to the birds, when you're watching the ocean, when you're sitting next to a river, when you're looking up into some old trees, that's when our brain can actually quiet for a second. When it can stop its constant scanning, planning, and worrying. Moments of awe actually increase our sense of connection. They soften our responses. And they remind us this key point that we're part of something that is much bigger than ourselves. I remember learning this in my forest school training, and I smiled. Not because it surprised me, and it actually wasn't the first time I'd learned it there either. I've learned it throughout life in many different texts. I'm sure you have as well heard about moments of awe and how impactful it can be. I mean, we look across cultures throughout history and we see how people across all of this time and space have protected rhythms that have invited them back into relationships with one another, with creation, and with themselves. There were the Sabbaths, shared meals, seasonal celebrations, time around fires where you were walking together, walking maybe to go get water, watching the stars, greeting at the sunrise, singing, praying, telling stories. Long before we as humans understood cortisol or nervous systems, people actually understood something really essential. Human beings were never created to produce without a pause. We weren't meant to work without wonder. We have always needed moments that remind us that we are more than what we just accomplish. Maybe that's why children seem to actually get this so naturally. They don't walk outside and think, I'm going to regulate my nervous system. They simply pay attention to what draws them. Maybe it's a puddle or a butterfly or a stick or the sound of water running somewhere. A patch of dirt can somehow become an entire world for a kid. And they don't rush into those moments because they're trying to get somewhere else. You see, they're completely there and present in the experience that they're having. They are in awe. Sometimes I wonder if children spend so much time teaching us because they haven't forgotten what we've actually learned to ignore. Lately, I've actually been asking myself a new question. The question is not, what should I be doing to recover? It's actually, when do I feel most like myself? The answers have surprised me. I feel more like myself when I notice the sunset instead of rushing past it. When I'm laughing, sitting around a campfire. Or when I stop long enough to be able to smell the cinnamon in my coffee instead of just drinking it while I'm answering emails. It's when I cook because I actually want to nourish my family instead of just checking another task off the list. Or when I can just sit and hear the birds, smell the air before I hear these notifications. None of those moments right there look like productivity. But every one of them leaves me feeling more filled up, more available to listen, more available to notice and to laugh and to love. And that's what I think, how we know that something is actually restoring us. You see, it doesn't have to give us more energy. It gives us more of who we are, of ourselves. I think that's what recovery has been all along. It's not escaping our life. It's returning to it. For a really long time, I thought that recovery was something that I had to schedule, something I'd finally get to once the work was done, once the kids were older, once life slowed down, once I caught up. I'm smiling as I say that because do we ever really catch up? Like, life keeps moving, children keep growing, and the laundry keeps finding us. And there will always be another email, another opportunity, and another reason to keep on pouring ourselves out, right? The world will never stop asking. And maybe, that's why recovery can't simply be something that we save just for vacations. It has to become something that is part of our everyday lives. One of the things that I really appreciate about nature is that it doesn't say sorry for its rhythms. We know that the trees do not bloom all year, and the river doesn't rush all the time. Look at the moon. It doesn't stay full every night. Everything in creation seems to understand something that we've been slowly forgetting. There is a time to grow, and a time to work, and a time to gather, and a time to rest, and a time to become quiet enough to receive again. And honestly, we aren't so different. Our lives were never meant to be one long season of output. We are always meant to ebb and flow, to give and to receive, to pour out and to be filled again. And that's honestly what I'm learning. And it's not perfectly, and it's not every day. There are still evenings when I find myself completely spent. Mornings when my watch reminds me again that my body is in overload. And there are still weeks when life feels so heavy. But this story right here, it's not a story about getting there. It's a story about paying attention, about noticing the little things sooner, about listening while my body is whispering instead of waiting until it's shouting. And honestly, I really think that's enough. Because every time that I notice a little bit sooner, every time that I choose to step outside instead of immediately picking up my phone, every time that I sit quietly enough to smell the cinnamon in my coffee and watch the birds instead of running to the next thing, it reminds my body of something. Remember, you're safe enough to slow down. You are supported enough to breathe. And you're human enough to recover. And that's what recovery really is. It's not escaping our lives. It's not fixing ourselves. It's not becoming someone new. Recovery is just creating the conditions that actually help us to return to who we are. Recovery is not the absence of work. It isn't the absence of responsibility. And it certainly is not the absence of life. I think it's actually one of the ways that we become fully present to it. Life is beautifully full, and children are loud, and families are messy, and communities need us. Yeah, the world asks some beautiful things from us, and recovery isn't stepping away from all of that. It's learning how to return to ourselves while we're living it. It's creating enough moments of replenishment that we can actually continue loving and serving and creating and noticing the people that are right in front of us. The version of us that notices, that wonders, that laughs, that cooks because it brings joy, and stays awake long enough to say goodnight, and has enough left to actually listen when a child says, "Hey mom, can I tell you a story?" And that's why this matters so much. Our children are watching, and they're not watching to see whether we're perfect. They're watching us to learn what it looks like to be a human. They're learning what work looks like, and they're learning what love looks like, and stress, and what recovery looks like. They're learning whether caring for people means disappearing ourselves, or whether it means living in a way that actually allows us to keep on showing up with joy and presence and hope. I know which one I want them to remember. And so this week, I don't want to leave you with another challenge. I just want to leave you with a question. And your body already knows the answer. When do you feel most like yourself? Not the version of yourself that's checking off all the boxes. Not the version of yourself that's surviving the week, but the version of yourself who is fully present. The version of yourself who notices, who gets to breathe a little deeper, who laughs easily, who gets to remember that life, it's happening right now. Whatever your answer is, pay attention to it. Protect it. Not because you've earned those times. You don't have to earn it. But it's because those moments, they are not taking you away from your life. They're returning you to it. If today's episode resonated with you, I hope you will take just a quick second, share it with someone who's also been carrying more than they realize. And if you too have also been walking through these last episodes with me, from talking about capacity, to shared care, to safety, and now to recovery, I hope that you will click that follow button and join me next week. Because I want to continue exploring how we create the kinds of homes, relationships, and communities where both children and adults can truly flourish. And until next time, pay attention to what helps you feel like yourself. Protect it. Return to it. Because those ordinary moments may just be doing way more for you than helping you to just rest. They may be actually helping you to return to yourself.